In this video, we're going to talk about dot plot graphs. Dot plot graphs have the purpose of the frequency table that you have worked with in elementary grades. So just as a reminder, so for example, this particular graph that we're analyzing has a set of data that is telling us how many minutes people take to eat breakfast. So in other format, I could have had a survey and kept my data in a tally chart. So I would say, Miss Smith, how many minutes do you take to eat breakfast? And Miss Smith would say 5 minutes. Mr. Leach, what about you? How many minutes? He would say 10 minutes. Mr. Davis, how long do you take to eat breakfast? He would say 4 minutes, and so on. So I would have my little tally chart, or truly, these tallies to collect my data. So instead of using the tally chart, we'd have the dot plot graph. Okay. So in your dot plot graph, so what you are seeing that in this survey that was collected, the smallest value was 0 minutes, the largest value was 12. There are no values for 6 or 7 minutes, but we can't skip that number in our number line. So it's just listed, but we do not have any data points for that. And it's okay. But I want to make sure that you understand why there is a blank space in your graph. So when you are doing your survey or analyzing, don't always think that you will start with a 0. You can have any value that you can start with. So for example, somebody else, you might have a survey about this particular topic, and everybody in your survey will say, well, 5 minutes is the minimum. So your number line could start at 5 minutes, 5, 6, 7, and so on. Okay. So in our graph today, we're going to be using this particular numbers, the values, to analyze mean, median, mode, and range that you were reviewing yesterday. So how do we really able to analyze the data without knowing what is in here? I want to make sure that you're comfortable with understanding these values. So for example, this right here, this column represents that there were 6 people, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them that said that they spent 0 minutes eating breakfast. So if I were to copy this down, I would have 6 zeros listed. Okay. Then it says 2 people, so 2 tallies, 2 people have spent 1 minute eating their breakfast. Then there were 3 people spending only 2 minutes. Okay. So that is how this data can be converted from this format to this format. There are 40 people who have responded. So our list would be very, very hard to analyze. Can you imagine 40 numbers listed right here? That's why this little graph is very handy in its format. It's not very overwhelming. And what we're focusing on today is how to get our values of mean, median, mode, and range from this data, and then analyze it and compare the graphs. Okay, so let's start with the range. So in your note, you are seeing, let me zoom out a little bit. You are seeing, we are going to take a look at all of these values. So mean, mode, median, mode, mean, and range. So the median is the value in the middle. If we have 40 people, there's truly not a middle number. So value in the middle would be, for us, 20th number and 21st. So when we split it in half, 20 on one side, 20 on another. So there's no value in the middle when you have even number of values. Okay. So I'm going to count off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. So 20 and 21 are both number 5. And it's really, really handy, okay? If you don't have even numbers, if you have odd, you truly will have a number in the middle. So mode appears the most. You could have more than one mode. And in our specific graph, what we're looking for a spike. So it is going to be the longest spike within our data. Yes, we have several. We have several little spikes happening right here. So we see in the 12 has the least respondents for 12 minutes, but for 10 minutes we have the majority, not necessarily the majority, but that value of 10 minutes was the most frequently appearing in our data. So number 10, so 10 minutes is the value that showed up the most. Again, you are looking at the spike and you would say, oh yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 people. Most, this number, the time frame had the most of respondents. 10 minutes is your mode. So mean is the value that is the most, I would say, labor intensive. We'll really have to be careful with this number. And I'm going to just kind of show you the process of what we would do. So with the mean, you have to add all values that you have received or collected, and then we divide by number of answers. Okay, so we have 40 people. Okay, we have 40 people. And so if I were to add all of my values, it would be 214 divided by 40 people. I did do this a little bit in advance because it can be a little bit time consuming. And it's really not usually something that we do a lot with dot plot graphs. I want to make sure that you do understand that how it would be done. So you literally would say 0 plus 0, okay, that's all zeros. 1 plus 1 is 2, plus 2 is 4, plus 2 is 6, plus 2 is 8, and so on. And you keep adding the minutes and then dividing by 40 people. So it is common for mean not to be a whole number. So 5 and 35 hundredths of a minute is our response. And then the range is maximum minus minimum. It is the difference between the minimum and the maximum values. So when we're looking at our graph, we are going to be utilizing our number line to see, well, what was our smallest time used to eat breakfast? Well, that was 0. 0 minutes. What was our maximum? How long was the longest breakfast? 12 minutes. 12 minutes was the longest breakfast. So 12 minus 0 will give you the range of 12 minutes. We have a lot of variety of our data. 12 minutes is the range. All right, so these are the basic attributes of a dot plot graph. And when we are analyzing these graphs, you are really need to be comfortable with how to find the value. So let's recap. Median is the value in the middle. So you have to sometimes count off and find what is the value in the middle. Just keep in mind you have odd number of values or even. Mode appears the most. So for our dot plot, we're looking for a little spike. Very, very helpful. This was our spike. So number of 10 minutes was our mode. Mean is the most labor intensive. So if you ever have to compare something in your graphs, try to focus on the other values that are a little bit less labor intensive before you compare mean. I'm trying to make sure you're working smarter, not harder. And the range is the difference between maximum and minimum values. So let's take a look at that comparison. How could you compare two graphs? So what could be some of your questions? So the second part of your note, let's take a look at the first two graphs. So there are two graphs that are comparing how many hours people spend exercising versus playing video games. So this is very common, the actual comparison question. So if they were to say, can you compare the range of the data? So for exercise, the range, let's take a look. The largest was 12 hours, and we did have one response. That person said they spend no time. So the exercise range is 12 hours. Okay, for video games, look at this, my friends, 0 versus 14. So 14 minus 0 gives us 14 hours. So video games have greater range. So the question could be, which data has greater range? One of the other questions you could be asked is about outlier. Outlier is very unique part of your data that is usually sitting very much separated from the rest of the values. So both of these values don't have a consistent presence for each little data points right here, but in this video game graph, let's take a look at this. Do you guys see this? We have only one person that said they spend 0 time gaming. The rest of the people were gaming 6, 7, 8, 10, 14 hours. So the 0 is a true outlier for us here in this particular data. So 0 hours in video games. This is the 12 hours almost looks like an outlier, but there are two respondents. So when you have 2 or more, they usually are not truly an outliers. The difference here, this exercise was 7, 12. Yes, it's kind of close versus 5 hours difference versus 6 hours difference. So they are very much behaving as outliers. So you could also be asked about the modes. So let's take a look at exercise. The exercise does not really have one mode. It has 2 modes. 1 and 2 hours. That was the most frequent response. In our video games, we have, and this is when it's going to get kind of crazy silly, because you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have more modes than the rest of the data. So at this point, yes, they could say, what kind of mode it is. You would say, the 6 and the 8 and the 9 and so on. Again, it is okay to have more than one mode, and you could be asked to compare which graph has a greater mode or which graph has an outlier. What is that outlier? So let's take a look at one of the examples. So this was borrowed from a test. And so here they're giving you several statements to compare. So we have the number of children's books purchased and in different stores, store 1 and store 2. So when I'm looking at my values, I'm looking at mode, range, mean, median. So as I mentioned to you before, mean is the most time consuming. So let's check the rest of them. So it says mode for the store 2 is greater for the store 1. Store 2 has the mode of 1, but store 1 has mode of 2. Definitely a false statement. So next one, Next is range, and range is the same, 0 to 6, 0 to